Hi there, everyone. How you doing? It's Jeff C. It's Monday, August the 4th. I've been looking more and more into Ebola. This is your Ebola update. When these things happen, they can happen real quickly. And what I've just found out is that I reported before on one person being tested in New York City with suspicion that they had Ebola. It's not just one that's been tested. In fact, now CNN has come out and admitted that 6 have been tested, and I found out that there's even more here. This is the NBC Nightly News, and they have tweeted this. There have been 22 cases of suspicion of Ebola symptoms in the U.S. in the past week. Now, that, as I said before, they might be just trying to scare the bejesus out of everyone, but nonetheless, they have been preparing for this for a long time, and all the evidence seems to suggest that this was in the cards. So I'm going to play this video. Of course, it's Mr. Ebola, Sanjay Gupta. I mean, really, he's Mr. Ebola, right? He's in all these things, and Wolf Schitzer, and let's listen in.
Correspondent Sanjay, what are the symptoms? What do they look at? Because some of those symptoms, they seem fairly common. But tell us what the symptoms they're looking at right now in this particular patient.
Well, some of the early ones are quite common and can be confused with lots of other things. Fever, someone can develop abdominal pain. Sometimes they can develop a rash over certain parts of their body, red eyes. Eventually, all those symptoms sort of get worse. And Ebola, as you may know, Wolf, sometimes is characterized as well by bleeding problems. The blood just doesn't clot as well, and that's why patients may have bleeding. Some of it you may see actually be able to observe it. Some of that bleeding can actually occur on the inside of the body as well. But again, it's the definitive test is the test you were just talking about with Jason, actually doing a blood test and confirming the presence of the virus and some of the antibodies to the virus in the bloodstream.
So I missed the last part where you said, how long does the test take to determine whether or not someone actually has Ebola?
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I was in Guinea, you know, they were doing the test there in the field, and sometimes they could get the test results back the same day. In the United States, interestingly enough, a lot of times they draw the blood, they send it to a particular lab, and it can take a day or two usually.
You gotta be fucking shitting me. Alright, this is the most deadly virus in the world, and you think they're gonna send it off to some lab and wait for, oh yeah, thanks, we'll see, maybe tomorrow we'll have it ready for you. I mean, for fuck's sakes, this is only the most important blood test that you could possibly take, possibly in the history of the United States, if this turns out to be a legitimate Ebola victims, now that there are several of them. Over 20 now, 6 in New York alone, and I imagine every person that person in New York who's under suspicion, or those people, now have to be potentially quarantined if this turns out. So we gotta wait till tomorrow till they tell us for sure, and are we gonna trust them anyways? But let's continue.
To get the results back confirmed. So I would guess by tomorrow we'll have a better idea. I should point out as well, Wolf, that the hospital has, you know, made this known. There have been about a half a dozen patients who have had their blood tested because of concern. Those particular patients, their stories were not made public. This patient was. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's because of heightened concern by the hospital or what that means exactly. But again, we just can't say for sure until the final tests come back. And, you know, they want to be sure on this. It takes about a day or so.
It's just absolutely absurd. So he doesn't know why they didn't make the other ones public. You know, why? Good reporting, you know. Why didn't they tell us that they're testing 6? Now first they say it's 1, now it's 6. Now you've heard 22 or something across United States. Now it's 22 cases off of NBC Nightly News. So they really are pushing the fear in this. Of course, I said before, if Ebola is airborne and it's out in New York, it's all over the world. So it would be the end game, really. It would be the end of days if the actual Ebola virus became airborne and was in New York City. I mean, it's just a little bit important. I don't know.
And this particular patient in New York, Does the patient have that internal blood clotting problem? Do we know if it's gone to that level, or is it just high fever and some gastrointestinal problems?
My understanding was the two things, the fever and the gastrointestinal problems, but also most relevant was the recent travel to West Africa. That when you're sort of piecing this together, you're looking at the history of the patient in total. What are the symptoms the patient has, but also the travel history obviously becomes very important. So piecing those two things together, there was enough of a concern by the doctors and nurses who were taking care of him to go ahead, isolate the patient, get the test performed, and wait for those results to come back.
And we should get the results probably tomorrow, is that right?
I think so. My guess is tomorrow. If it may go into the next day as well, because they
get the
sometimes
fuck
send these
out of
results
here,
out.
man. Fucking hell. It's just absolute bullshit. Yeah, it's fucking Ebola. Take over the goddamn lab if you have to. Do the fucking test right away. You think, oh yeah, in the bush. Out in the bush, they get the test back in, oh yeah, they can get it back the same day. But in the big city with all the money and all the frickin' facilities, no, we might get it tomorrow, might come the next day, way to go, Sanjay Gupta. I mean, this is such utter fucking bullshit.
One thing that, I think is worth, sort of putting a punctuation mark on is that he isn't going to be in isolation, but we've talked about this several times, Wolf. This isn't the kind of thing that they worry about spreading to other patients in the hospital.
Yeah, he's not going to be in isolation, and this isn't the kind of thing that they worry about spreading to other people. Yeah, you could go to fucking Liberia and tell that to the people in Liberia when they burn down houses, when they burn down villages to fucking annihilate the virus. All right, give me a fucking break. So they went through that whole rigmarole of bringing that guy over in the jet, in the freaking plastic wrap and the shoelaces, and made a big stink about it. Of course, they had a cameraman 10, 15 feet away snapping photos in plain clothes. Ebola is only the most deadliest virus in the world right now, and it is the worst possible thing that could get out. It could mutate. It may have already mutated. They may have already put it everywhere. Who knows, right? But my word, if you gotta be kidding me. You would be so serious. They could have tests. I'm sure they could have those tests back in an hour or half an hour. This is 100% bullshit. There's no way it would take a few days.
Spreading to people who are walking around the hospital. This is not an airborne virus. This is something that spreads only when somebody is very sick.
All right. And you go down there and you climb in bed with him, Sanja. You fucking flaming fool.
They start to actually shed the virus in their bodily fluids. So it's somebody who comes in contact with those bodily fluids who's not protected. So while we know the particular story with this patient, we don't know if in fact he has the Ebola infection. In terms of concern for the hospital population at large or the population around the hospital is still very minimal.
Very minimal indeed. And as I said, I don't want to overly alarm people in New York City. There have been at least that we know of 6 cases of individuals who have come to the United States from West Africa, from some of these countries, who have come down with some symptoms. All of them were tested, all of them negative for Ebola. So let's hope the same is the case right now.
Yeah, whatever, man. I mean, it's total freaking bullshit.